let's get started. Once again, welcome everybody to today's webinar, Best Practices in Reporting. There's a subtext to this, which really focuses on today's webinar, which is literally discovering insights step by step, right? I mean, when the entire idea of generating reports, once you've done your research, your surveys, your feedback, you want to get some data nuggets that you can take that and, create an action. Come up with a plan that will help you take the next step to fix the issues that you have within your organization, right? So that is going to be the goal behind this. So with that in mind, let me introduce you to today's host, yours truly, Harris Azmi, as Chief Revenue Officer. I'm aided and abetted in my effort here by a very, very capable individual that I know has been with SoGoSurvey for many years along with me, Melissa Kret, Senior Director of Success. And Melissa is also going to be the one who, towards the end, probably will answer a lot of your questions. She works with clients across different industries. Her experience in not just managing very complex projects, feedback projects with very large organizations, but also at the same time working with some challenging issues that even some of our small businesses and clients have. So a wide range of experience. So I'm glad that she's on the webinar with us today. So one of the most important things that I want to mention about reporting is this, that your reporting starts the moment you start planning your survey and the survey questions. Because the questions you ask, the type of questions you ask, the type of scales that you use, the Likert scale, the psychometric analysis that we want to do, whether you are bringing some historical data along with that survey, right? We call it pre-pop data or automatically filled in data. All of those things are going to determine the type of reports that you will get. So if we did not pay too much attention over there at the time of coming up with the questions and what type of questions to ask, there could be an issue when you're running the report. So it is so critical that we focus on that, which is why we offer a separate webinar on that topic called Best Practices Design. And you may have received this link also. If not, then we will share this link with you in the chat or after the webinar. Also, if you log into your account, you will see right there at the top of your account a link to sign up for this webinar. So I know quite a few people have signed in. If you haven't, I would highly encourage that you do so. And you will see over there, I think Melissa hosts that webinar, and you'll see she'll talk about what type of questions to choose based on what kind of reports you want. One of the other things that is very important when we're talking about report is, are you also going to bring your operational data? So SoGoSurvey integrates with many, many platforms and applications like your CRM tools like Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics or any other CRM tool that's out there. There are some native integrations, which literally is a one-click integration, and sometimes you might do the integration through APIs. But the entire idea behind that is, can I pull in the operational data about your customers, about your employees, so that when I'm slicing and dicing the data, I can use that operational data, right? And the other added advantage of that is I do not have to ask those questions for whom I already have the data. So double edge benefit right there. But I'm going to assume that, in this case, all the attendees here, they have the survey set up right, they have the data, and you're now trying to find that data nugget. So you may be dealing with this issue, which is you have too much data. And in many cases, you have all these nice, pretty charts and graphs, but there's very little insight, right? When you see the first report, you see all these pie charts and bar graphs and bubble charts, and they all look very nice. But what kind of insight or do they help you in identifying the root causes is really what we are after. What are the root causes? Why are my customers happy or unhappy? What really is driving that satisfaction level? Are my employees engaged or disengaged? What's driving that engagement level? Let's get to that root cause. And that's what we're going to do by practicing those best practices when designing reports within SoGoSurvey. So this is a slide, and what you're seeing over here is what we're going to be spending a lot of time today. So Omni Report is one report that all our clients, enterprise clients, have it, which is why I'm going to spend a lot of time on this one. And we're going to focus on two big things. Make the graphs speak to you. And there is a way where when you look at the data first initially, it may seem a little overwhelming or all over the place. But then with small customization, you'll start to see that the data will start to speak to you. It will tell you whether things are good, bad, or ugly. And we'll see how that happens. And then we'll do all the nice things listed underneath it. And then finally, in order to get that insight we're talking about, we'll have to connect the dots. So first of all, how do we identify the dots? Once we have identified the dots, then we will, of course, go ahead and connect them to discover insights. So Omni Report is going to be our starting point, and then we'll move from there, and we'll use these dots. And by dots, I really mean these different reports that we have. Depending on what we see in the Omni Report or one of these reports, we will kind of follow a trail that will lead to a lot of insight. Depending on the time, we might be able to, get into detail of just a handful of reports, but for the others, I will quickly mention to the extent possible. In my case, what I love to do is not just talk about it, but literally go into the reports and see the whole thing play out in action. So I'm going to go ahead and actually do that. And let me go ahead and log into my account. And while I do that, here's one thing I want to do, which is share my screen again to make sure that you can see that. Let me know if you can see my screen where I'm logged into my account.
Looks good.
Thank you. So this is my account. This is the enterprise account, which I think all of you do. I'm going to pick a project, and then we build a narrative from there. And how about we drive the entire today's webinar using that example. The example I have, and let me know if for whatever reason, if you're unable to see my screen, I might make some adjustments. So I'm going to pick an airline here. So you see I clicked on the airline folder, and I have two surveys within the airline, pre-flight and post-flight, right? There used to be a time when we used to fly, and anytime we would land at the airport, we would get this survey instantaneously. In many cases, before you even leave the airport on your mobile device, please rate your recent flight. And so I have taken an example survey, a mock-up survey. Let's take a quick view of what that survey looks like, because reporting, when we look at it, will be easy and fun once we know what are the questions asked in that survey, right? So the first question I have, and this is for an airline here, we're taking Emirates as an example. This is the airline that flies to Dubai and all over the world. So the first question we have is, how satisfied are you with your recent flight, right? It goes on a scale of very dissatisfied to very satisfied. And if depending on what I click, I have an open-ended question. We're sorry to hear that you have a bad experience. And if you're very satisfied, then we're delighted that you're enjoying, right? So that is that option, but let's move on. After that, we see there is an NPS question, right? How likely are you to recommend this airline? And then, what was the reason for your travel? Did you obtain a visa through Emirates? Yes, no. And if I say yes, then I'm asked another question, rate your level of agreement, which is the process to obtain the UAE visa was easy. And so we move on. Then there is a matrix grid question where we ask our passengers to rate the airline in the following categories: in-flight entertainment, meal, Wi-Fi, flight attendance. You can add more. And then there's another question, again, matrix grid question that goes on a scale from poor to excellent, 5-point scale. And then we're asking the passengers to rate on the following criteria: on-time performance, check-in process, so on and so forth. This is more overall about the airline. The previous question was more specific to that recent flight that you just did. Once you're done with that, of course, you'll hit submit. So that's the survey. We're going to deep dive into this report. So the moment I click on report, here I am. And this is the default report, Omni report, right? You don't have to do anything. The moment you click on report, you're brought here. The first and foremost thing that I do from a best practices point of view is only display the questions that I really want to see. In my case, when you saw the survey, you notice that you didn't see passenger name and Skyward number and Skyward Steer, which is the loyalty program that Emirates Airline has. You did not see because these were the hidden questions. Remember we talked about pre-pop data? So there's a lot of data that is being pre-pop about the passengers. So they don't have to remember these and they don't have to provide. I don't need all of this in my analysis. I want to remove ticket number, PNR code, really, right? I mean, has no relevance here when I'm analyzing the data. But I'm going to keep this, which is the loyalty program, tier program that they have, right? Whether you are blue, silver, gold, platinum. We do want to break down the data into those categories, so we will keep that. And then also run through this. I want to keep everything else. You'll see at the end, there's a lot of metadata that SoGoSurvey provides you, how much time the participants took to complete the survey, the language in which they participated in the survey. If you want to include that, keep them, otherwise remove, right? Removing unnecessary questions from the report helps you and all your colleagues to just focus on the important aspects of the data we're looking at. Do we want to realign the report so that the flow of the data is helps you analyze the data quickly? I want to do that. I have some open-ended questions, so I will take these open-ended questions and move them at the end, right? So I want to read those open-ended questions at the end. I just want to first look at the closed-ended questions. Once I've done that, I will go ahead and generate the report now. Now my report looks like this. Omni report is a report that gives you all the breakdown of the survey questions in an aggregate format in one quick glance, in one long report, depending on how many questions you have, could be long or short. But you remember Skyward Steer I introduced, so here's how the participant breakdown is based on that category. Then we had a question, how satisfied are you? Now you can see very dissatisfied, 7%, so on and so forth. There was an NPS question, so the system Omni report recognizes the different question types. And remember, if we talked about it, what question types you choose has a bearing on the report that you get. So if you choose NPS question type, the data you will get is this. If you use satisfaction question type, there are other things that we'll just talk about it, and what that means and why that is important. And then so on and so forth, right? I'm moving through. And then here's the other thing. If you remember that I had a matrix grid question over there. So here's the matrix grid question. And this is normally how SoGoSurvey provides to you the matrix grid question. Now, this is something what I really want to focus on. How would you rate us in the following areas, let's say? And I'm looking at the data in-flight entertainment. And by default, SoGoSurvey gives you this blue shade of color palette. And the reason we picked this as a default color, because this is the one that is used in most, I want to say, professional reports that are being published. It matches the look and feel of that. However, it can really mimic your brand if you want to by choosing one of the other color options. But if you remember, we talked about making the graphs speak to you. What I want to do is, if I'm looking at this question, I have a 5-point scale that goes from poor to excellent. So it starts with a negative, then moves towards a positive aspect of the responses. What I want to do is, how about I change the color of this graph where I do not have to figure out what percentages are really negative responses and what are positive responses, right? Using this gradient of blue, it's not very clear to me. Now you will notice for each and every question, you have two options. You have question options. We'll look into that in a moment. And then you have answer options. Within these answer options, you have something called customized graph. I'll pick that first. And there's a color palette. And depending on what psychometric scale that you have used, whether a 5-point scale or a 7-point scale or a 10-point scale, these colors, these color palettes are designed to reflect that. Since I have a 5-point scale, I'll skip all the 10 points. If you have a 7-point scale, then you probably want to use the 10-point scale because that's covered within that. You have, these two are my favorite, Likert 5 and Reverse Likert 5. And as you can see in Likert 5, it starts with the green, the cooler shades of the color, move towards a warmer color, and Reverse Likert is just the reverse of that. I will pick this, and I'll tell you why. Because if you remember, my scale goes from negative to positive, and Reverse Likert goes from, as you can see, warmer colors to, and I will apply this to all graphs. See, here it is. I just applied that to all the graphs. I'll go back to that question. Now, as you can see, certainly the data, they're speaking to me. My eyes are drawn to these warmer colors. I do see now 10%, they have rated poor in-flight meals, 17% in-flight Wi-Fi, and then the yellow is fair. So now certainly it has become easier for me to analyze the data, right? Now, here's the other thing that I can do. I can, for example, in many cases, right, excellent and very good. And again, you will, Melissa, I'm sure we'll talk about in the best practices design. When you talk about scale, many times, how do you distinguish between very good and excellent, right? Somebody asked you, you just had a great experience. Somebody say, hey, how was that experience? You might say very good, excellent, with a very little difference between the two sometimes. So sometimes it makes sense for you to combine the responses of very good, excellent. And we also have something called good. I mean, you can choose to combine these three together, which kind of denotes a positive experience overall. And fair and poor clearly tells you that not a positive experience, right? So that's what I'm going to do. Next thing that I'm going to do is reduce this whole thing into a smaller subset of answer questions. And the way I'm going to do that is I will go back to answer options right here. And you'll notice that I can now take poor and fair, and I can combine it. And I can take good, very good, and excellent, and I can combine it. Now, as you can see, I have 6% that is poor and fair, and I have good, very good, and excellent. Now, it is so much easier for me to know that 94% of the people have a positive experience when it came to entertainment, compared to 80% with meal, 66% with Wi-Fi, and 93% with attendance, right? We took a data that looked fairly complex, right? And we have broken that down into more manageable, easier to understand data. So that is one way of looking at it. And one of the other things that we can do in OmniReport is, now as we are looking at what will help us understand this data, we also want to start figuring out those connections, those dots. Give me some clue that will help me understand why are passengers complaining about something. If I go back to my NPS score here, it is 41, right? I do have 23% detractors. I have 13% passives and 64% promoters, or your champions or brand ambassadors. If you're doing an employee engagement survey, we have a report called engagement. We'll talk about it. It also gives you a very interesting data in different formats. The idea will always be, why are passengers happy or unhappy? So that's the goal now. We will try to understand that. I'll go back here. I will start to break down this data into different segments and filters. So I will click on this question options, and you will see towards the bottom, you can apply a filter. Filter is literally, you apply a filter on any question or answer option within your survey, and it will remove every other data other than that which applies to that filter. So if I say only show me data for passengers who flew in the silver category, those who belong to the silver category of our loyalty program, or gold, whatever the case may be. So it will just look at that bracket. It will just look at that particular data. Whereas segmentation allows you to create multiple buckets, and you can compare side by side with that. So I'm going to use segmentation, and I'm going to apply the segmentation on our loyalty program, which is Skyward Steer program. And I'm going to choose all of the buckets here. NA, I'm going to remove them. These are passengers who did not have any loyalty program in it. And also you will notice that there's something called show overall. So when I break the data down into these buckets or segments, of course, I will see this data broken down into 4 buckets, each one of these. And I will also have a show overall, and I'll do this. And I can call it whatever I want. I can say overall, and I can say apply to this. Suddenly you see each and every data is now broken into 4, blue, silver, gold, platinum, and then the 5th one is the overall that we added. So the overall means that the average for this category, in-flight entertainment, the poor rating, negative experience is 7%. So now when you compare this with the blue category of passengers, clearly they have, their response, their experience is worse than the average, right? 87% have positive experience compared to 93%. So clearly I can tell you the blue category. Now you can interpolate this with your data, right? Whether it's your employees from different departments, your past customers belonging to different industries with different products, so this report can really help you start to understand that aspect. Who amongst your group of your customers and employees have a worse experience compared to the others, right? So this is how much you can go. Remember, we're all about making the graph speak to you. Now, certainly, since I introduced segmentation, again, I see that it has become a little bit more cumbersome to understand the data, right? I mean, this is great. I mean, if you spend time, but I'm all about breaking down the data into a format that will speak to you. So in light of that, again, I'll go back to question options, and we've created something what we call mean graph. What mean graph does is that it's one of those magical graph numbers. It reduces all your numbers, right? If you look at the question below, there are 5 numbers you're dealing with, right? 42, 24, 24, 11, right? 5 different scales. We reduce that to 2 by merging the answer options. What if I want to still just get one data that will tell me overall experience? And that is your mean graph. Certainly now you see I am looking at, so your blue category is denoted by red color, silver with this silver kind of or yellowish color, gold, platinum, overall. And I can always remove overall if I don't want. But now you can clearly see the overall data and how everybody else is performing in that category. So I can now see that blue overall is 4.22 out of 5 when it comes to in-flight entertainment. So, okay, interestingly, the blue category of passengers, when it comes to entertainment, they're pretty happy. However, when it comes to Wi-Fi, they're 3.26, slightly less. So you are able to break down the data from 5 to 2 to 1 data point. And certainly you see a fairly complex data has become more manageable. So from an analysis point of view, from reporting point of view, I find this practice to be extremely helpful. Then the other thing that you want to do is, as you are creating different reports, right? The reports that you create and generate, they're like a living entity in themselves. That means as more data comes in, it's dynamic. It will automatically start to update itself. That's number one. And then you can create so many different instances of this report. I applied segmentation on Skyward Steer. What if I want to apply segmentation based on these 3 categories: detractors, passives, and promoters? Help me understand who are our brand ambassadors, right? how they have responded compared to our detractor, people who clearly are unhappy with us and are possibly talking negative things about us on social media and elsewhere. I want to compare and see where the difference lies. What exactly is bothering the detractors? So I can break this data down into different buckets. But before you do that, so that you don't lose this data or don't make the data over complex, go ahead and save this report, right? So you can say overall tier breakdown, right? Any report that you save goes into your save reports. If I go there, I'll see. So here it is, overall tier breakdown. Now here's the other interesting thing. You can save this report, share the URL, and you can copy this URL and send it to your colleagues, to your managers. One of the best practices I would want to recommend, because you don't know, because it's a simple link, anybody who has the link will be able to see the data. I would highly recommend it from a best practices point of view that you set password, so that even if by mistake somebody shares it on a public forum, it is still invisible to the unintended audience. If you want to allow people to download the report, you can definitely do that. Once you've set the password, you're more at ease. So this, in a nutshell, is what I would call really is the Omni report that we created, we generated. We can spend a lot of more time here. One of the other things that I just want to quickly mention, depending again on the question type, what you might want to do is display different charts and graphs. Now here's something, again, I'll talk to you about. We're looking at this. We took a report that looks something like this. We've broken it down to something like this. Now here's another thing that you can do. You can always go and split these matrix grid questions into sub-questions. So I can definitely do split sub-questions. Now each question is in its own little stack bar graph. And now I can go back to this and I can say customize graph. Now certainly I have a lot more graph type options. I can say show me horizontal. That could be one option. And I can also break this down into vertical. And you decide which one looks better for you, right? So you can definitely take, so Omni report is one where I would highly encourage that you spend a lot of time, which is why bulk of my webinar today is on this topic. But once I have figured out, I clearly want to get into the point where help me understand where the issues are. For that, I will dive into a report called Key Driver Analysis. Now, this is a report that is provided only in our CX platform. So those who have it clearly will be able to use this. If you don't have it, I would highly encourage that you talk to your account manager to enable this in your account, or how you might be able to get it. KDA, or the Key Driver Analysis, what it does is that it takes the core factor that you're measuring, in this case, customer satisfaction, or loyalty, or effort score. These are the three main metrics that we are measuring. So I'm going to keep satisfaction, and let me take a look. And KDA report is a quadrant. It breaks the data into 4 quadrants here. The first quadrant is what is considered as important weakness. It tells you this is the area that is extremely important when it comes to impacting the satisfaction score. And based on the data that we've measured, your data shows that your organization is weak in this area. And what is that? In-flight meal. So clearly passengers who have rated overall experience as bad, there's a direct and strong correlation with their flight meal served. Now, this is the issue that I need to take up with catering. But what exactly about the flight meal? Is it about the options? Is it about freshness? Is it about, what is exactly about the meal that I want to? Now, I will go to another report to look at that data. But this is the overall data. This is every passenger, irrespective of the different categories or loyalty program that they belong to. I haven't done that. But if I want to split this data, or deep dive into it, and I say, show me, let's apply a filter, and I want to see platinum, gold, business, or silver. Let's say if I apply silver category of passengers, suddenly you see the graph changes. Now I have in-flight Wi-Fi as the most important issue. So when I looked at all passengers without any filters, it was meal. So if I want to overall make an impact quickly, improve my satisfaction score, I will go and talk to catering. And I will give very specific feedback to catering. But if I want to improve the overall score of passengers who fly with the silver category, then clearly I want to look into Wi-Fi issues. So break this thing down for your own customers, right? Which category, which segment they belong to, which industry, what product type, what is more important to them. And this is a report that not only tells you what you need to work on, but in what order or the priority that you need to work on. So it's a great report. That's a very action-driven report. Really, I will go and look at Wi-Fi, or I will look at meal overall if I want to. Now, if I change the metric from satisfaction to NPS or loyalty, if that's what I want to improve, then I will change this correlation to NPS, and I will do that. So this is something we can do. Once I have this data, another thing that I want to do is text analysis. What text analysis allows you to do, as the name suggests, take every open-ended response and see how are people responding to that. What are the topics that people are mentioning in their open-ended response? So people are, of course, air travel. This is airline, so I expect that to be the case. Then I also see some other categories popping up, food and drink. So people are talking about food and drink. And as more responses come in, you will see the system. It's a very heuristic system, self-learning system. It automatically starts to generate categories for you or the topics for you as more responses come in. And then we also have an advanced version where I can tie my account to a specific industry. So because this is my demo account, I do demos with 15 different industries, to be very honest, so I cannot tie my account to one particular industry. But you as an individual customer, since you work within a certain industry, you can tie your account, and again, talk to your account manager if you don't have it already, where you can tie your account to a particular industry. That way the system becomes even more smart and is able to give you a lot more insight how you compare, and your categorization of topics and all will improve drastically. But skipping aside all of those things, let's move to measuring the sentiment, right? How many times you have looked at those open-ended response and geez, we're like, where do I begin, right? If you have hundreds and thousands of open-ended responses, what I can do is really quickly say, just show me the negative sentiments, right? I want to see where people are complaining. What are they complaining about? And clearly, you know that people have been talking about, food is one big category that I know people have been talking about. So I can definitely look into that. And I can pass on that feedback to the catering department, and I can definitely do that. Now, if I go and include not just this, but maybe neutral also. And here it is. I have filtered hundreds of responses and just looked at a handful of negative comments, and I can clearly start to see. Requested a special meal. The requested meal was not served, right? So clearly a negative expression, and probably this is the reason why this is, and so on and so forth, different. The staff at the check-in counter was rude to my family, right? And certainly you can go through this. You can apply a filter where you can say that search by keywords. Now, if I want to apply for keyword, I would simply go and say include all, and I'll say save this, and I'll say food, and I can say food or meal. See, now these are all the comments that have food or meal. The food was warm and served well, right? Great food. As these options come in, you're now able to take this. Now, overall, this is, again, as you collect more and more responses, you will have these things to forward it to the right department so they can take action. So you saw that we went to look at Omni, we started to drill down, we made the data speak to us so that it starts to make more sense to us. From there, we went to KDA. KDA showed us that Wi-Fi and meals are two different issues. Overall, if I want to improve satisfaction, then meal, and then if for a particular category of customers, I want to focus on Wi-Fi and so on and so forth. Now, some of the other things that we can talk about is you can, if you remember, I talked about engagement report. So if you have employee survey, especially measuring engagement, that's the report you want to run. That takes about another 10 minutes. Unfortunately, we don't have that time, but definitely talk to your account manager, or if you have it in your account, please run with it. The good thing about our reports, and from a best practices point of view, I'll let you know that all our reports are very visitor driven, right? By that, what I mean is that you will see a step-by-step what you need to do, right? So enter the details, next pick the engagement questions. They're very self-driven. You cannot make a mistake. The software will not let you make a mistake. And so at the end of which, when you are done, you will have the report, an accurate report. We also provide within special reports what we call dimensional analysis. If you want to do year over year, quarter over quarter comparison, you want to do trend analysis. And so far, every report that we have looked at has focused on one particular survey. What if you have common set of questions, whether it's NPS question or CSAT questions, that appear in multiple surveys, right? And it happens. Larger organizations, different departments are running different surveys globally. But as at the headquarters, somebody wants to compare all of these common set of questions that appear in all these multiple surveys. In those cases, you want to do dimensional analysis. And what dimensional analysis allows you to do is pick multiple surveys, pick the time period that you want to compare. And if you want to compare all time periods, that's fine too. And then you will be able to pick the common set of questions across different surveys and be able to see very interesting data. Because we're almost coming towards the end of the webinar. There's so much to talk about. Please let your questions come in. I will have Melissa read and we'll take it from there. But while, Melissa, you're getting the questions, the final thing I just want to leave everybody with is we also have a full-fledged dashboard that allows you to track the assessment, the trend analysis of NPS and CSAT and effort score. And then you can figure out, I can click on these different data points and see why there's a drop from October to November of last year, why there is an increase from Feb to March, and then a slight decline, or maybe it's flat and then goes up a little bit. I'm able to drill down into these things, and even the system will start to tell you what are the things you need to do in order to improve the trend that you're seeing within these things. It's all in there within SoGoSurvey. You have a platform that really allows you to take your data and do very, very interesting things. Hopefully you'll spend enough time to discover them, play with them, and be able to make good use of that data. With this, I'll take a pause, and then we'll go through the questions.
Awesome. So I'm going to take this first question, Haris, and I'm going to give you the second one about sentiment analysis. The first question is, can I use my own color palette? It's a great question. Obviously, we want everyone to be able to have good-looking reports, not only just the graphs, but the colors as well, too, and such like that. Currently, in the Omni report, you are not able to set individual hex codes, for example, for every single answer option. For example, you see that Haris has chosen from a number of different scales that we have built into the platform, different colors or gradients of the same color. At this point right now, if you'd like to do that, you can do the same thing within the advanced frequency report. So this is right at the top of your screen. When you see frequency, you'll see advanced frequency. So this has a lot of the same functionality. It's a little bit different, it has the wizard, as many of our reports do. That advanced frequency report will allow you to, once you generate it, be able to set every single color that you like. So you can set them across and say, if you set it, for example, one stacked bar graph for all of your scale points, the exact same colors you want. You can also say apply to the rest of the report as well. So you'll see a lot of that similar functionality, nice looking bar graphs, a lot of those sort of similar things, stacked bar graphs, display, merge answer options, metadata, all of those pieces. That can also be done right in here. All you have to do is click on the exact color and it'll pop up a display. So you can navigate around different colors, or if you know the exact hex code, you can just type that in and it will update. So really great question. So that was the fun one, Harris. I'm going to give you the other one here, which is about sentiment score. The question is the sentiment score a range from -1 to 1, and can you explain it a little?
Yes, the sentiment score, I'm assuming you're talking about the text analysis. It is a range from -1 to +1. And so just to give you a clue, what we're using Google's sentiment analysis. We did the research a few years back then when we were thinking of introducing it to our clients. We looked at IBM's Watson, we looked at Google's sentiment analysis, we looked at a handful of few others, and we found out that nobody does sentiment analysis better than Google, right? And for all the obvious reasons. They're analyzing billions of search every day. They understand how to parse or analyze a text, and which is why in partnership with Google, we provide this feature to you. So we use Google's API to pass it, and the sentiment analysis is set up in such a way that the more closer it is to a -1, more negative that response, that reaction, that experience is. So compared to -0.2 and -0.8, really, -0.2 is closer to a neutral, 0, and then compared to 0.8. So that is how that algorithm really works. And like I said, it is a self-learning. So initially, if you see the data maybe where you felt like this is not negative, this is more neutral, and guess what will happen? You will have the option to create your own topics. You will have the options to fix the scores. If it is negative, you may say this is not negative, this is neutral. The system will learn from your feedback and will start to, and once you provide enough feedback, it will become smarter and smarter. Hope that answers the question. Melissa, we can take the next one.
Yeah, that's it actually. Those are all the questions. So I think you probably did a very thorough job in answering all the questions. I will just in the chat while we're here saying goodbye, giving people a moment just in case they have any final questions. Within the chat, I'm just dropping in that link to the best practices session. If you haven't joined that already, you are more than welcome to join that with me. There are a number of sessions for that. And I'd also invite you to take a look at some of the other sessions that we have available on an ongoing basis. You can find them within your account. When you click on that question mark in the top right-hand corner, you will see the Help Center. And within there, you'll also be able to see trainings and webinars. So you're always welcome to join us for any of those. We really appreciate you joining us here today. And we look forward to seeing you again down the road.
Thank you, everyone.